Chapter 1, Early Years. Do you know what you want to do with your life? Jane Addams thought about this a lot when she was a child. Jane was born in 1860, and she grew up in Cedarville, Illinois. Her mother died when Jane was young. Jane's father took care of her and her sisters. Mr. Addams was a rich man, and he was also a philanthropist, a person who helps others. Caption: Even as a young girl, Jane wanted to make a difference in the world. Jane learned from her father to be kind and to accept others' differences. She loved to learn and to read. Jane saw that some people were rich and others were poor. She could see that the rich and the poor had unequal lives. She wanted all people to be treated fairly. Jane wanted to be a doctor. Her father wanted her to get married and have a family. Jane did not want to get married, but she also did not want to defy her father. Caption: Jane's father, John Addams, was a successful landowner, miller, and banker. Addams had a good education. She studied at Rockford Female Seminary. She was good at reading, writing, and public speaking. When Addams was 21 years old, her father died. Addams was devastated. She decided to study to be a doctor, but she was too sad to study. Then she became very ill, so she gave up college and her dream of becoming a doctor. Caption: Addams, back row, made some good friends at school. Addams traveled overseas after she left college. She went to London and saw many people living in poverty. She wanted to help, but what could she do? She visited a settlement house in London called Toynbee Hall. It was called a settlement house because the young men who worked there settled there to live. The young men were educated, and they wanted to help the people in the neighborhood. They offered classes in singing, reading, and drawing. Addams was excited. She wanted to set up a settlement house too. Sidebar: Extreme poverty. Addams visited a London market. It was the end of the week and the market was closing. The rotten food was being sold. The food was bad, but Addams saw thin people dressed in rags trying to buy it. These people were very poor. They were living in extreme poverty. Jane never forgot what she saw. Chapter 2. Addams Takes Action. Addams returned to Illinois, where she and her friend Ellen Starr looked for a house to rent. The two friends wanted to set up a house like Toynbee Hall. They would use the house to improve the lives of the poor. They found an enormous, run-down old house in a poor neighborhood in Chicago. The house was called Hull House. Addams and Starr knew that some Americans wanted to learn about the differences between the rich and poor. They wanted to teach these Americans more about the lives of poor people. Classes at Hull House could help teach people about equality. Caption: Hull House was originally owned by a wealthy businessman, Charles Hull. Hull House would offer poor local people education and classes in music. This kind of opportunity was usually reserved only for the wealthy. Addams and Starr wanted educated women and men to live at Hull House. They wanted these people to get to know their neighbors, who were neither rich nor educated. Addams had money of her own, which she used to fix up Hull House. She also sought money from other wealthy citizens to help keep the house running. Sidebar: Life in the city. Addams and Starr set up Hull House at a time when many people were coming to America from Europe. These people were looking for a better way of life. People moved to Chicago to find work in factories. Women, men, and even children worked long days and nights. They worked in places that were not safe or healthy. They were not paid enough money. The bosses, the business owners, became very rich. With great anticipation, Addams and Starr opened Hull House in 1889. Many people wanted to help her, and they moved into Hull House too. The local people liked to meet at Hull House. They could take many different kinds of classes, including English classes. Hull House had a theater, a library, an art gallery, a kitchen, a gymnasium, and a music school. People could also go to Hull House if they needed help with child care or if they needed a doctor or a lawyer. People liked what Addams was doing, and they set up settlement houses in other cities. Caption: Addams started clubs for children. Addams was kind and good-hearted. She was an outspoken advocate for the poor, and she talked to many people about the importance of helping others. Addams became famous in the United States. Hull House needed money to keep going. Addams wrote a book about her life called 20 Years at Hull House. She was a good writer. The money she made from her books was used to support her work. Sidebar: Valuing traditions. Addams set up a labor museum at Hull House. At the museum, older immigrants used spinning frames and weaving looms. It was a way for them to share with others their knowledge of traditional arts and crafts. Addams wanted people to realize that the skills of these older immigrants were still valued. Caption: Addams wrote a total of 13 books. Chapter 3: Changing the World. During Addams' life, there were many poor women, men, and children working in factories. The work was unsafe. They worked long hours and were not paid enough. However, if they did not work, they would starve. 3 children were hurt at a factory. One of them died. The machine they used was dangerous. Addams talked to the factory owner. She asked him to put a protective cage over the machine. She was shocked when the owner refused. Caption: Children often worked in factories like this one that made fabric. Addams could not help poor people by herself. She realized that poverty would not go away unless the laws were changed. Addams wanted to make things better for workers. She believed women should work only 8 hours each day. She wanted a better justice system for young people. She worked hard to make school free for all children. She talked to politicians about changing the laws. Many people agreed with Addams. They worked together to make changes. It took a long time, but the laws were reformed. Sidebar: Children are cheap. Most factory bosses did not want to change child labor laws. They thought children should understand the value of hard work. They said that widows needed the money their children could earn. Child labor also meant it was cheaper to run their businesses. Child labor was finally banned in 1938. Addams knew that to make positive changes in the world, she needed to get people to change their attitudes. Addams was known for her work helping the poor. She also helped people who were treated unfairly because of their race. Addams helped set up the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. Both organizations still exist today. Sidebar: Everyone is responsible. Addams believed that everyone has a responsibility to help others. Addams spent her life working to make positive change. She worked to help women, children, and ethnic minorities. She also worked for better health care, for the poor, and for peace. She asked, what is more important than having faith in new possibilities and the courage to advocate them? Addams also tried to change people's attitudes about war. She thought that war was wrong. She even tried to stop World War I. Addams talked to people about the importance of peace. Many people supported her. They set up women's peace organizations with Addams. They created the Women's Peace Party, the International Congress of Women, and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Not everyone agreed with Addams. Some people wrote her nasty letters. Some newspapers criticized her work. Addams didn't stop, though. She knew she was entitled to say what she believed. She kept working for change and for peace. Caption: The Women's Peace Party delegates sailed on this ship to the International Congress of Women in The Hague in 1915. Jane Addams is one of America's best-loved and most well-respected leaders. She spent her whole life working to make positive changes for people. Addams was courageous. She was often sick, but she never stopped working for what she believed. She never gave up her goal of helping others. In 1931, Addams received the Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of her life's work. Timeline: Jane Addams. 1860, born, Cedarville, Illinois. 1881, graduates from Rockford Female Seminary. 1887, visits Toynbee Hall. 1889, founds Hull House. 1909, helps found NAACP. 1910, publishes 20 Years at Hull House. 1915, helps found the Women's Peace Party and organizes the International Congress of Women. 1919, helps found the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. 1920, helps found the American Civil Liberties Union. 1931, receives the Nobel Peace Prize. 1935, dies, Chicago, Illinois. Caption: Addams was the first American woman to receive the Nobel Peace Prize.